Welcome to the Putting Your Business on the Map podcast. My name is Landon Blake. I am your podcast host. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the podcast. If you're curious and you'd like to learn more, we have a special page for the podcast up at www.landonblake.com. Make sure you check that out. We've got our show notes there. You can also download the podcast in your favorite audio format. You should also be able to find the podcast on Spotify and on YouTube. So we've got the podcast episodes in both of those places. So if you use one of those apps or services, you can subscribe to the podcast there. Full disclaimer, I record most of these episodes at my home in Stockton, California. I am married to a crazy Mexican woman, and I have 2 dogs, so you may hear her or the dogs during the podcast episode. I just want to warn you ahead of time. I love all 3 of them, but they are noisy. So if you would like to sponsor a private recording studio for the podcast, make sure you reach out to me and let me know that. Otherwise, you may have some background noise. So with that disclaimer out of the way, we're going to jump right into today's episode.
I'm re-recording our very first episode of Putting Your Business on the Map. The audio quality on the first couple episodes is really bad, so I wanted to redo those. So Carly, who helps me with the podcast, listened to that horrible audio and got me a couple outlines for those first couple episodes because I had lost my outlines. And so I'm able to redo this, so thank you, Carly. So this episode, the first episode, I talked about the top 3 challenges of our first 3 years in business, and I thought those were important, and so I wanted to re-record this with a little better audio. Now I will tell you, we just had our 4-year anniversary, so we're on our 4th year, and some of the challenges, we face a lot of challenges running the business. I'm not sure if the 3 challenges I talk about in this episode are still our top 3, but they are still certainly in the top 5 or 6. So the challenges maybe have changed in order of severity as the business has grown. But I'm gonna talk about those top 3 challenges we had the first 3 years in this episode because I think they're important. And if you're starting your own surveying or mapping business, you're probably going to run into these challenges. So what are the 3 challenges? What were the 3 hardest things our first 3 years in business? So the first one was just finding good clients. The second one was managing cash flow. And the third one was dealing with what I call the cesspool of professional practice in land surveying. And so I'm going to talk about each of those for a few minutes. Now, when you start your business, you may find that your challenges are different. Maybe your top 3 aren't those, but that certainly was our top 3. So let's just go ahead and jump right in here and start with that first challenge, and that is just finding good clients. So that was a huge challenge the first 3 years that Redefine Horizons was in business. Now, I think of the 3 challenges we're going to talk about here, this one has become less of a challenge as we've moved into year 4. So we have a decent base of good repeat clients now. I wish that base was a little bigger. But we do have, I would say, a handful of good repeat clients, and they appreciate what we do, and they don't bicker about our pricing. They understand, what makes us different and how we add value. And so those are good long-term relationships. And so we're deeply grateful and thankful for those. But when I started Redefine Horizons, I really only had one client like that. So I had a land attorney that I had worked with for a long time at a couple different companies. And he was actually our first client at Redefine Horizons. And he was a big, his name is Dominic. He's a big part of the reason why we started the business. And so he was our first client and brought us our first 2 projects, actually. So our first 2 job numbers here at RH are jobs that we did for Dominic. But he was basically it. He was the one repeat client that we had. And so we've been able to slowly build up a group of good repeat clients. It's about 1 a year, maybe a little more, maybe about 1.5 a year. I don't know if that trend will continue, but that's kind of been the pattern. So why was this a challenge, finding good clients? I think the first reason it was a challenge was it was way more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So there were things I just didn't understand about the marketplace. So a lot of this was my own overconfidence, or you could even call it hubris maybe, or arrogance. Now I will tell you that in my previous roles as a project surveyor and project manager at other companies, I did do business development. I did a little bit of marketing, and I did some sales. So I was not completely new to that role, but I certainly saw. So I think a couple things were different. One was when I started RH, I no longer had an in-house civil. So a lot of surveyors, a large percentage of the work that they do just comes in through the marketing and business development efforts of the civil engineering side of the house. So they're supporting their own civil. So I did not have that. It can be an advantage and a disadvantage, but let's just call it an advantage for the purposes of this conversation. So I didn't have that advantage. Our RH does not do civil engineering work. So I was not benefiting from the work that a civil engineer would bring into the business. And I had a couple misconceptions about who our clients were going to be. So let me come back to that. I'll talk about that in a minute. So I didn't have the benefit of an in-house civil. The other reason this was a challenge, the second reason was I underestimated how cheap and short-sighted the typical potential client would be. So I really thought if I could just educate potential clients about the value of a good survey, that people would buy one, and that was a big mistake. Most people don't care. Most people don't care about value. They are just interested in getting the cheapest price they can get. And I don't have that all figured out yet. Excuse me. That was a surprise to me. I think some of it is people just don't understand what we do as land surveyors, and so they don't understand value or why it's important to hire a good reputable quality surveyor. So I think that's part of it. They just a lot of folks don't understand what it is we do or why it's important to hire a good surveyor. I think some of it's just there's a lot of bad surveyors running around. I'll talk about that at the end of the episode. That's challenge number 3. But needless to say, I made a pretty huge effort to educate folks, especially in the real estate industry, and those efforts were mostly unsuccessful. So, didn't have an in-house civil, and thought I could educate people about the value primarily of a good boundary survey. That proved to be almost impossible. And then the last thing was I really thought that most of my clients were going to be, people in the real estate industry. So I made a real effort to reach out to real estate agents and brokers the first year I was in business. And when I say, I mean a huge effort. Knocked on doors of real estate agencies, met with multiple times with real estate professional associations, real estate agent professional associations, gave webinars and talks, and really saw almost no return out of that effort. I think in the 4 years I've been in business, we've done 1 or 2 jobs that came through a real estate agent or broker, which came as a real shock to me. Now, I'm not surprised by that now because I learned some things, and part of what I learned is real estate agents and brokers have really bad incentives. So they all of their incentives are almost all are to close the sale as quickly as possible. Surveys only find problems, and so most agents and brokers, even when they're working for a buyer, do not have an incentive to get a survey, and that's something that I had to learn the hard way. So that was a real disappointment, and it took me a while because I didn't give up easily. So I would say I put a year and a half into a real strong marketing effort at folks in the real estate industry, and that was not effective. The other thing I really thought was that I would do more survey work for civil engineers, and especially civil engineering companies that didn't have their own in-house surveyors. And what I found out is civil engineers may actually be the worst type of client that we can get here at Redone Horizons, which is not what you would expect, right? So civil engineers, I kind of look at them like our brethren, you know. They're probably the profession that we have the most in common with, except for maybe land attorneys. They do understand a little bit about what we do. They face a lot of the same challenges that we do in the marketplace. But yeah, pretty much almost every single civil engineer that I have worked with as a client here at Redefine Horizons has been a bad client. And so that really surprised me. And so that was an effort that I made. I made an effort to reach out to those folks, and that effort was mostly unsuccessful. So part of the reason why I think it was just hard to find good clients was because I had some misconceptions about who those good clients would be. They are not real estate agents or brokers, and they are not usually civil engineers. Now, thankfully, we were able to do some pivoting, and we were the victims of some good circumstance, and we've been able to find some good clients. None of our good clients are civil engineers or real estate brokers. So we were able to find good clients outside of those two industries. And I think one of the things that makes my company a little bit unique is, we don't do construction, we don't do lot surveys. We do almost no work for civil engineers, and that is very unusual. Now, sometimes we are working for a client, and some of our deliverables are going to a civil engineer, but our client relationship is almost directly with the project owner. And we made the decision about 5 months ago, so the end of 2023, we basically made the decision that we would no longer contract directly with the civil engineer unless there was a very special circumstance. So we prefer to contract direct with the client. We can talk in another episode about why that is. So it was tough to find good clients. Part of it was I was looking in the wrong place. Part of it was just, I underestimated how hard it would be to find people that valued a good survey. So one of the things that I learned is we had to find other ways to provide value. So most people don't understand what a quality boundary survey is and don't care. So we found other ways to provide value. So part of that was quick turnaround. We'll do an ALTA survey in 10 working days, typically, even a big ALTA on a challenging site. So quick turnaround, good client service. We found that when we bundled the boundary survey with other services, it tended to work better. So we did some bundling, and we engineered the business to provide fast delivery of a good product, and so that has worked for us. So one of the other things we've done that has made this easier, and again, this is probably a topic for another episode, is we've just gotten better about filtering out bad clients. So we don't spend as much time now on proposals as we used to. We filter our leads a little more effectively. And so we're pretty good about finding the 10 or 20% of the marketplace that we want to work for. 80 to 90% of the marketplace we don't want to work for. They're not going to be a good fit for us. So there you go. There's the first challenge, just finding good clients. It's been way more difficult than I thought. Now, the flip side of that, or the upside, is we take really good care of good clients when we find them, because they're hard to find. So it has made me appreciate good clients more. And that's not a bad thing. And I think most of this challenge was largely just an education problem for me as a business owner. I had to go test some things out in the marketplace and learn what worked and what didn't, and who were good clients and who weren't. And so some of that was just my learning. But it's still a challenge. I would like to have more good repeat clients than we have. I don't think I could take 10 more. I could take 3 or 4 more probably before we were out of bandwidth. Maybe not even that many, maybe 2. And so we're looking for a couple of those good clients that we can take care of. Okay, so the next challenge was just the second big challenge of our first 3 years in business is managing cash flow. And give me a second here, guys. I heard my phone ping at me, so I'm going to turn that down. Let me try and find that, and I'll try and turn it down. I don't know where I left it. I might have left it in the other room, so I apologize. So, and if you're on YouTube now, you can see my camera tried to follow me and was not able to do that. So let me see if I can get my camera back. Sorry, that's what happens when I get up out of my seat. All right, hang on one sec here, guys. I'm gonna pause this. All right, there you go. There, now you can see my handsome face again. So the second challenge was managing cash flow. I will tell you, this is still probably a major challenge. So of the 3, this probably remains in our top 3. We are getting better at it, but it is still really hard. So what does that mean when I say managing cash flow? So our problem in the first 3 years was typically not that we didn't have enough revenue, or even that we didn't have enough profitable revenue. So for the size of our company has grown. We've gone from basically 1.5 people to 14 in 4 years. So, and we always had enough work as a general rule. We had enough work for the number of people we had. There was only one situation where we had to have a layoff, and it was after I fired a bad client that was a big chunk of our work. I talk about that in episode 2. So our problem really hasn't been finding enough work for the people we have, but having money in the bank when we need to pay bills. So it is a challenge to get paid on time by our clients. I think what I've learned is it doesn't have anything to do typically with if it's a good client or a bad client. It's just hard to get paid on time. And as a profession, we've set some bad expectations. So, we get a lot of clients that want 90-day payment terms, or they want us to take pay when paid or paid if paid payment terms. And it's just hard to get people to pay their bills. And what that means is it's hard for you to pay your bills on time. And that's super frustrating for me because I've always been very conscientious and had good credit and paid my bills on time like religion. And so that's an extremely frustrating problem for me. Now we do some things that I think we do a better job than most companies, and certainly than almost all small survey companies that I know. We do a better job of managing cash flow. So we get deposits and retainers. We bill, we bill weekly, not monthly. And yours truly does some of the bill collection. So as a principal, I'm very involved in monitoring our cash flow and making sure bills get paid. It's still a huge challenge, even though I think we're better at it than most companies our size. It's still a major challenge. Now, I don't want to bore you guys. I don't want to talk about that too much because I do a whole episode just on managing cash flow. So I certainly encourage you to check that out. And I've even got a video up where I go through what a cash flow management spreadsheet is. So I don't want to spend a lot more time on this. But yeah, cash flow has been a big challenge for us. All right, so the last one of the challenges of the top 3, so this would be number 3 of our first 3 years in business, was what I call the cesspool of professional practice and surveying. So what do I mean by that? I'm talking about low standards of practice. In other words, Surveyors don't do what they know they should. Now, primarily, I see this in boundary surveying. So I think, I'm not sure what the root causes of this are, and it deserves its own episode, but I think some of it is people construction surveyors that occasionally do boundary surveys when they're not qualified to do that, so they're just ignorant. So that's a huge part of it, I think. That problem is getting worse as more and more construction surveying and layout gets automated. We get more and more construction surveyors trying to make a living by doing boundary surveying, and they don't do a good job, most of them. So I would say 70%, or maybe even more, maybe 80% of the licensed surveyors in California do not have any business doing boundary surveying. I know that's going to, when people hear that, they're going to get upset. It's going to irritate them, but I think it's the truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The real estate in California is very expensive. We have a lot of regulation, and I think a lot of surveyors either are ignorant and aren't qualified to do good boundary surveys. The other problem we have is it's easy to cut corners on boundary surveys. So it's fairly technical and complicated, and it's easy to cut corners. And so guys, even if they know the right thing to do, they cut corners. And I'm not talking about every once in a while or a little bit. Like, this is pervasive across the profession. And it's been a few months since I recorded this episode, and I've seen even more of this. I mean, just over and over. Like, just this last week, I was talking with a landowner in Southern California who had a surveyor come and survey her lot and set monuments, and the neighbor got a survey. That surveyor put monuments in a different place, and so I ended up getting a copy of the first survey, and it was not a good survey, and this surveyor, didn't do a proper job. They basically did what we call deed staking, and every week I get these stories. It's deed staking, corner dusting, just not pulling the adjoiner deeds, not looking for all the monuments. Doing 2 monument tango, just really, really, really bad practice. And so what does that mean for me as a business owner? What that means is I have a really hard time selling honest boundary survey, because I'm doing all those things. We're looking for monuments at every corner. We're pulling the adjoiner deeds. We're doing all the research. We're analyzing alternative solutions. We're filing a record of survey maps when it's required by state law. And it's really hard. On a small boundary survey, my price might be, let's say I'm somewhere in the $8,000 to $12,000 range for a fairly simple boundary survey on a small lot. A lot of my competitors are $3,000 or $4,000 because they're doing a third of the work. They're not following the law. They're not helping their client. They're not getting their client what they need. It's depressing. Makes me depressed about the state of my profession. Sometimes I wonder if we should even have a license when I see this stuff going on. And I'd be honest, sometimes this is done by people I know in the industry, and even people I would call my friends. And that is really disheartening. And so that's a huge challenge. I enjoy boundary surveying. I'm good at it, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the history, and I enjoy the challenge, and I would love to do more of it. But it's really hard as a small business owner because so many other surveyors are cutting corners, and clients don't know any better or don't care, and it's really hard. Now, I'm not asking for the listener to feel sorry for me. That's just the reality. I don't know that there's a whole lot I can do to change it. And so, what you have to think about is, how do you deal with that, right? How do you deal with that challenge as a business owner? How have we dealt with it? Well, we don't compete in a lot of the market for boundary surveys. That's one way. So I never compete based on low bid. In fact, if somebody calls here, and this just happened to me last week, somebody called for a boundary survey, and they've got an encroachment. It's pretty clear they already have a building encroachment. This is a buyer, potential buyer. And the real estate agent called me, And I talked him through what I thought was going on. I poked around a little bit. I don't normally do that, but in this case I did. I told her, I said, you got some problems here, and yep, you should absolutely get a survey before you buy. And I gave her, ballpark price for what that would cost, and she said, well, my client's going to go shop around. And I said, yeah, don't call me back. She's like, well, why not? I'm like, because I already know I'm not going to be the cheapest, and if that's what your client wants, they're going to get what they pay for, right? So part of our solution to this challenge is we just don't compete in that part of the market. Now, we do boundary surveying, but we're usually doing that as a bundle of other services. So we're doing some control and maybe some UAV LiDAR or some aerial mapping, and maybe we're doing it as we're doing some expert witness testimony, or we're doing it as to support an infrastructure project or a land development project. We don't do a bunch of standalone boundary surveys, almost never. And it's just because it's too hard to compete in that market. So we've learned, we do boundary surveying and we're good at it, but we do it typically as part of other bundles of services, as part of a bundle, or we do it at scale. So we do really large boundary surveys because other small survey shops don't have the capability to do that. So we do sometimes do large boundary surveys. But so we found ways. We know more about that market now, my partners and I, and we understand where we can play and where we can't play. We can't play in the small. So a lot of times we can do deeded parcels because a lot of surveyors won't do deeded parcels. They'll only do parcels that are on a map. We do surveys where monuments need to be set because a lot of surveyors don't want to set their mons. They want to set their monuments. So sometimes we get hired to survey deeded parcels or parcels where monuments need to be set, or big boundary surveys, or when people are in a hurry because we can get to things in a couple weeks usually. So I don't think that challenge is going to go away. In fact, I think it's going to get worse. I think as more and more construction gets automated, more and more surveyors from the construction side are going to come and try and be boundary surveyors. And you know what? My company is going to get hired to fix stuff. We're going to get hired by the lawyers, and we're going to get paid to go fix bad boundary surveys. I would say it's already a fairly big part of our business. It's a significant chunk of our revenue. I don't know. It's 25%. 25% of the work we do is expert witness work when other surveyors have dorked stuff up and we're getting paid by the attorney. And I would say expert witness work might be 50% or more of the boundary surveying that we do. And I suspect that trend will continue. So there you go. In summary, top 3 challenges for my business, our business. It's not my business. I have 2 partners. Our business. The first 3 years were finding good clients, managing cash flow, and the low standards of professional practice that we find in our chosen profession of surveying. I don't have a solution for the 3 of those. We do what we can to manage those. So, and like I said, of the 3 challenges, I think finding good clients has probably moved down the list for us in the level of severity. I think just part of that is we've gotten smarter and we've been in business for a little while. But yeah, managing cash flow is still a major problem, probably in the top 3 still. And low standards of practice, again, we figured out some ways to deal with that. Still a big challenge. I am not optimistic about where my chosen profession is headed, but I think my company will adapt, and I think we will continue to be hired by the small portion of the marketplace that appreciates why good survey is important. And there are a few clients out there that understand that. A lot of those clients have been burned by a bad survey, and so they've learned the hard way. So that was a pretty depressing episode, right? But if you're thinking about starting a surveying and mapping business, you can listen to that, and it'll help you maybe go into it with your eyes wide open. Now, I think it's the second episode or the third. I actually talk about some of the pleasant surprises of running a survey business, so it's not all bad. I gave you the bad. I gave you the depressing stuff in this episode, but there's some very rewarding and satisfying things too. And so those will be in one of the other episodes. I think it's episode 2, and I'm going to re-record that also so the sound quality is a little better. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and definitely catch episode 2. Subscribe to the podcast. tell another surveyor or mapper about the podcast, share it on social media. I would appreciate all of that. Would be awesome. And I appreciate you guys listening today.
That's going to wrap up our episode for today. Once again, I want to thank you guys for listening. Appreciate that. Don't forget, you can check out the podcast, download episodes, view show notes at www.landonblake.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or you have a suggestion for a future topic for an episode, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can find my contact information all over the web. Landon Blake, I'd love to hear from you, and we will catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks.